Welcome back to the English Hour, everyone. We're diving even deeper into the world of travel today. Daniel, Jacob, let's keep this conversation going. Travel really can change your perspective. How do you think traveling has changed your approach to learning English? Do you feel like it made you more confident in speaking or maybe helped you focus on different aspects of the language?
Great question, Sophia. I'd say traveling made me much more comfortable with spontaneous conversations. At home, it's easy to stick to a routine and only use English in formal settings, work, study, etc. But traveling forces you to interact with people in all kinds of situations. Whether it's ordering food, asking for directions, or chatting with someone at Kai, I've learned to focus more on communication rather than perfection. It's about getting your message across, and that's something I really took from traveling.
I completely agree, Daniel. Traveling also helped me focus more on practical language use. It's not always about grammar rules or big vocabulary words. It's about learning phrases that make you sound natural. For instance, picking up common expressions like "what's up?" or "how's it going?" really helps with fluency. It's not textbook English, it's real-world English.
That's such a good point, Jacob. We don't always need perfect grammar to communicate effectively. It's more about the flow and the ability to make yourself understood in everyday situations. So, for listeners who want to start improving their English in a travel-friendly way, what are some simple tips you'd give them to begin?
I'd say, start small. You don't need to go on a long trip to begin practicing. Even if you're just taking a short weekend trip to a nearby city, use the opportunity to practice speaking in English. Try to communicate with hotel staff, shopkeepers, or even fellow travelers in English. And don't be afraid to ask people to correct you. Most people will be happy to help, and it's a great way to learn.
Definitely, Daniel. Also, don't be afraid to listen to English in different contexts while traveling. Listen to how locals interact with tourists, or even how they speak among themselves when they think you can't understand. It gives you insight into the informal ways people use English. You might even catch a few slang words that could come in handy.
That's such a great suggestion, Jacob. It's so helpful to absorb the language in real, everyday contexts. Now, let's talk about something else that's closely related to travel: cultural exchange. When you travel, you get to experience different cultures up close. How has that impacted your understanding of language? Has it helped you learn more than just English?
I think cultural exchange is one of the most enriching parts of travel. Language is so closely tied to culture, and learning about a new culture makes you understand the language better. For example, in Japan, the way people express respect through language is so deeply ingrained in the culture. I noticed how differently people speak depending on their relationship to the person they're talking to, and it made me think about how I communicate in my own language.
Exactly. And learning about other cultures through their language has taught me empathy. I've traveled to places where English isn't widely spoken, and even though I don't speak the local language fluently, I've learned to communicate with people in a more meaningful way. It's not about being perfect. It's about respecting the culture, and sometimes that means understanding their values and traditions through how they speak.
That's such an important point, Jacob. When we travel, we're not just learning a language. We're learning to appreciate and respect the different ways people see the world. Now, let's talk a little more about how you two prepare for a trip. When you plan your travels, do you do any specific language preparation before you go? Or is it more about learning on the go?
For me, it's a mix. I usually try to learn a few key phrases before I go. Simple greetings, asking for directions, or basic shopping phrases. But I'm also open to learning while I'm there. I love being in situations where I'm forced to use the language. It's like the best immersion you can get. But even with basic prep, I know I'll be learning every day I'm on the road.
I'm similar to Daniel. I always learn a few important phrases before traveling, especially ones that might help in emergency situations, like "where's the bathroom?" or "can you help me?" But I also try not to overthink it. I find that learning on the go, as I interact with locals and other travelers, helps me improve the most. You pick up so much just by being present and willing to engage.
It sounds like both of you are all about that hands-on learning. Immersing yourself in the language is key. Now, as we're talking about language, I know that traveling can sometimes challenge your comfort zone, especially when it comes to speaking a foreign language. Do you ever feel anxious or nervous before speaking English in new situations? How do you push past those feelings?
Definitely. There are moments when I feel anxious about making mistakes, especially in unfamiliar places where I'm unsure about how well my English will be understood. But I've learned to embrace the discomfort. I remind myself that the goal is communication, not perfection. Plus, making mistakes is part of the process, and people are usually very patient.
I totally understand that feeling. I used to get nervous too, especially when speaking with native speakers. But I realized that the fear of making mistakes is worse than actually making them. The more you speak, the more confident you become. It's all about practice.
That's such great advice. Overcoming the fear of making mistakes is key to becoming a more confident speaker. And as you said, both you have proven that the more you practice, the better you get. It's all part of the journey.
Exactly. And I think the most important thing to remember is that no matter where you are in the world, if you're speaking English, you're already connecting with people. That's the beauty of travel. It's about sharing experiences, learning from others, and growing together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of traveling, getting to communicate and connect with people from all walks of life, all while improving your language skills. You can't really put a price on those experiences.
You both are spot on. Travel is such a transformative experience for personal growth, and language is just one of the many ways it changes us. Whether you're traveling to improve your English or just to explore the world, it's an opportunity to enrich your life in so many ways. Let's keep this conversation going. How do you both stay motivated to travel and keep exploring new places?
For me, it's the curiosity. I'm constantly curious about the world, and there's always something new to learn. Traveling satisfies that curiosity and keep motivated to explore. Every trip feels like a new adventure, and that sense of discovery never gets old.
That's a great point, Daniel. For me, it's about the stories I get to tell. Every place has its own story, and I love being part of that story. Whether it's a small moment or an unforgettable experience, there's always something I can take with me. Those stories keep me motivated to plan my next trip.
It's inspiring to hear both of you talk about travel with such passion. Your curiosity and love for discovery really shine through. I think it's safe to say that travel not only broadens your horizons, but also deepens your connection with the world.
It absolutely does, Sophia. And I think one of the best things about it is that it allows you to break out of your everyday routine. It forces you to adapt, be flexible, and think outside the box.
Definitely. And let's not forget the friendships you make along the way. I've met so many amazing people from all over the world, and those connections have made my travel experiences even richer.
That's so true. The friendships, the experiences, and the lessons you learn from traveling all come together to shape who you are. So, for everyone out there planning their next trip or dreaming of their next destination, I hope this conversation has sparked your excitement and encouraged you to keep exploring. Keep practicing your English, stay curious, and remember, the world is yours to discover. As we continue, let's dive deeper into some of the more personal aspects of traveling. When you think back to your past travels, can you recall a specific moment where language really played a crucial role in your experience? A moment where speaking English, or even struggling with it, made a significant impact on your journey?
Wow, I can think of a few moments like that. One in particular stands out. I was in a small town in Italy, and I had gotten lost. I don't speak Italian, and the locals didn't speak much English. But there was one shopkeeper who, despite our language barrier, took the time to help me. We used a mix of hand gestures, basic English phrases, and even a bit of Google Translate. That experience really taught me the value of communication beyond just words. It wasn't about speaking perfectly. It was about the effort, the connection. That's something I've carried with me on every trip since.
That's such a good example, Daniel. I've had similar experiences. One time in a remote area in Southeast Asia, I was trying to find my way to a bus station, but no one spoke English. I had to rely on basic phrases I'd learned before the trip. Eventually, I came across a group of local children who were excited to practice their English with me. Even though their English was basic, we communicated, laughed, and they helped me with directions. That simple interaction made me realize that language is a tool for building bridges. And even if you only know a few words, those words can help you connect with others in ways you might not expect.
Those are both such powerful stories. It's amazing how language can act as a bridge in such unexpected moments. It's also a reminder that sometimes communication isn't just about getting the right words out. It's about connecting, making an effort, and learning from the experience. Now let's talk about a common challenge many travelers face: navigating cultural differences. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where language or cultural differences created a bit of tension or confusion?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the most challenging, but also enlightening experiences I had was in India. English is widely spoken there, but the cultural norms can be quite different from what we're used to in the West. I remember a situation where I unintentionally offended someone because I didn't fully understand the cultural context of a certain phrase. It wasn't a language barrier, but more of a cultural misunderstanding. That was a big learning moment for me, reminding me that language is deeply intertwined with culture. It's not just about the words, but also respecting the cultural nuances behind them.
I can relate to that, Daniel. I was traveling in Japan once, and there's a strong emphasis on politeness and indirect communication. I had learned some basic phrases, but I hadn't fully understood the cultural subtleties. I accidentally said something that came across as too direct, which made the other person uncomfortable. It was a bit awkward at first, but the beauty of travel is that those moments can teach you so much. I took that experience as a reminder to approach every culture with respect and curiosity, learning not just the language but also the unspoken rules that govern it.
Those are great insights, guys. Cultural misunderstandings are a big part of travel, but they also provide opportunities to learn and grow. It's important to be open to new experiences, especially when they challenge our own ways of thinking. So, shifting gears a bit, what do you both think is the biggest misconception people have about traveling and language learning?
One misconception I've encountered is the idea that you need to be fluent in a language to travel effectively. A lot of people feel like they can't travel to non-English speaking countries unless they speak the local language fluently. But the truth is often spoken in major cities around the world. And even if you can't speak the language perfectly, people are usually very patient and willing to help. What matters is your willingness to engage.
I totally agree, Daniel. Another misconception is that language learning has to be formal and structured. People think you need years of classroom lessons to speak another language confidently. But traveling is proof that you can learn through real life experiences. I've learned so much more through conversations on the road than I ever did in a classroom. The informal, practical learning environment is key. You learn what you need when you need it.
Those are both great points. Sometimes we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to be perfect in a new language. But as you've both mentioned, it's all about communication, confidence, and immersing yourself in the experience. And as for misconceptions about language learning, it's true. Traveling teaches us that learning doesn't always have to be formal or textbook-based. It's a dynamic, living process.
Exactly, Sophia. One of the best things about travel is that it allows you to break free from the idea that there's right way to learn. You discover what works for you, and it's often different from what you'd expect. For example, I found that making mistakes on the go and having people correct me was the best way for me to learn. That's how I became more confident in speaking English.
And another thing I've learned is that language learning doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. When you're traveling, you're exposed to the language every day, and you learn bit by bit. It's not always about making huge leaps in your language ability. It's about small, consistent progress.
Absolutely. Jacob. I think the key takeaway for everyone listening is that language learning and traveling are intertwined in the most rewarding ways. They both require patience, persistence, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. And when you do, the rewards are huge, not just in terms of language, but in personal growth and connection with others.
That's the magic of travel, isn't it? It's not just about seeing new places, it's about the way it changes you. Whether it's through language, culture, or experiences, every journey leaves an impact.
Couldn't agree more, Daniel. It's a never-ending learning process. The more you travel, the more you realize how much there is to discover, not just about the world, but about yourself and your own language skills.
Well said, guys. And for our listeners, remember that travel is a powerful tool for language learning and personal growth. Don't be afraid to jump in, start small, and let the journey teach you. Keep practicing your English. Stay open to new experiences and never stop exploring. Until next time, safe travels and happy learning. Before we wrap up, let's talk about how people can use travel to push their language skills even further. Daniel, Jacob, can you share some tips for those who want to integrate language learning with their travels? Whether they're planning their first trip or looking to deepen their language skills on the road.
One thing that I always suggest is to learn the basics before you go. Even if you don't become fluent in the language, knowing some key phrases can make a huge difference. Greetings, asking for directions, or ordering food are essential, and locals really appreciate when travelers make an effort to speak their language. It shows respect for their culture and help you feel more comfortable navigating your surroundings.
I totally agree with Daniel. One thing I've done on several trips is to set myself small daily goals for language learning. For example, I'd learn 5 new words or phrases every day and try to use them when I interact with locals. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. By setting small goals, it keeps the process fun and manageable. It also helps you build confidence because you see progress every day.
Those are both fantastic tips. It's not about mastering the language all at once, but about making consistent progress and being open to learning. Daniel, you mentioned respecting the local culture. How can language learning go hand in hand with understanding different cultures, especially when you're traveling?
That's a great question, Sophia. I think one of the best things about language learning while traveling is that it opens the door to understanding culture in a deeper way. Language is so tied to cultural identity. For example, when you learn to say please and thank you in another language, you're not just learning words, you're also learning the social norms and that come with those words. In some cultures, for example, how you say something is just as important as what you say, like using formal or informal pronouns. So when you learn a language, you start to understand these tonalities and what they reveal about the culture.
Absolutely. And language learning also encourages you to pay attention to things that you might not notice otherwise. For example, many languages have idioms or expressions that don't directly translate into English, but they reflect the way people think and experience the world. By learning these expressions, you get to see the world through the eyes of a local. That's one of the most enriching parts of traveling and language learning, getting to understand different cultures' view and interpret life.
I love that perspective. It's not just about speaking the language. It's about connecting with the essence of a place and its people. Now, as we're nearing the end of this episode, let's share some advice for our listeners who are still hesitant about traveling or language learning. For anyone who feels nervous about speaking or is unsure where to start, what would you say to them?
I'd tell them not to be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone starts somewhere, and mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. The key is to keep going, even when it feels uncomfortable. People will respect your effort, and that's what matters most. Don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back from trying. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
I would say, just go for it. Traveling doesn't have to be perfect or planned to the last detail. It's the unplanned moments, the surprises, and the spontaneity that make travel so special. And in terms of language, the best way to improve is to practice in real situations. Start small. You don't have to be fluent, you just need to get started. And remember, people are more understanding and supportive than we think.
That's such solid advice, guys. It's all about starting, no matter how small the steps may seem. The fear of making mistakes fades when you realize how much you learn from them. And with each experience, you become not just better at the language, but better at navigating the world around you.
Exactly. And the beauty of travel is that it teaches you something new about yourself with each journey. It pushes you to grow in ways that go far beyond language and culture. It's a tool for personal transformation. So, if you're considering traveling or learning a new language, I'd say, go for it. Don't wait for the perfect time. There's no time like the present.
Well said, Daniel. Traveling and learning a new language will expand your world in ways you can't even imagine. The journey itself is just as important as the destination, and every step you take brings you closer to becoming a more confident, open, and curious version of yourself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So, to everyone listening, remember that the world is full of opportunities to learn, connect, and grow. Whether it's through language, travel, or the people you meet along the way, embrace every moment. There's so much out there waiting for you. And don't forget, language is not a barrier, it's a bridge. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep traveling. I love how we've touched on the power of travel and language to transform us. But let's dive into something that many people struggle with: the fear of getting out of their comfort zones, especially when it comes to speaking a new language. Jacob, Daniel, what would you say to those who are afraid of speaking because they feel they'll make mistakes?
That's such a common fear, Sophia. I think the first thing to realize is that everyone makes mistakes. Even native speakers make mistakes. And the beauty of learning a language while traveling is that mistakes become learning moments. People are usually very supportive when they see that you're trying. I remember once in France, I mispronounced a word, and the person talking with just smiled and gently corrected me. It made me feel more comfortable, not embarrassed. It was a reminder that everyone is on their own journey, and language learning is a process, not a performance.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to remember that people aren't judging you as harshly as you might think. Most locals are thrilled that you're trying to speak their language. When you approach a new language with humility and the mindset of a learner, you're not just opening doors to communication. You're opening doors to connection. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Often, it's an opportunity to bond with someone. And every mistake you make helps you improve.
That's so true. When we approach language with an open heart and a willingness to learn, it can lead to beautiful moments of connection. But what do you think, guys, about the importance of patience in language learning? How can travelers stay motivated when progress feels slow?
Patience is key, without a doubt. The truth is, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. When you're traveling, you're constantly being immersed in the language, which helps you learn faster, but that doesn't mean you'll pick everything up right away. It takes time. For me, when I started feeling frustrated with my progress, I'd remind myself of all the small wins, like ordering a meal in the local language or understanding a street sign without having to look it up. Those small victories build momentum. So, staying patient and celebrating progress, no matter how small, is crucial.
Exactly. And I think it's really helpful to set realistic expectations. You're not going to be fluent overnight, and that's okay. Set small, achievable goals like learning 5 new words a day, having a short conversation with a local, or understanding a TV show in the local language. And if you don't hit your goals every day, that's fine. It's about progress, not perfection. Staying motivated is about focusing on the long-term benefits, not the immediate results.
I really like that perspective. It's so easy to get caught up in the desire for instant results, especially in a world where we can get things so quickly. But learning a language, especially while traveling, is more of a slow burn. The key is to stay patient and celebrate the small wins. And speaking of small wins, let's talk about some practical tips for incorporating language learning into travel. Any advice on how to make language learning a natural part of your day when traveling?
I think one of the best ways to make language learning part of your daily routine is by integrating it into your experiences. If you're visiting a market, for example, try learning the names of fruits and vegetables in the local language, and then use them when you're shopping. Or if you're at a cafe, practice ordering your coffee in the local language. I've also found that when you see a word or phrase written down, try repeating it in your head or out loud. The more you hear and see the language, the more it sticks.
That's a great tip, Daniel. Another thing that's worked for me is listening to podcasts or audio resources in the local language. If I'm on a bus or sitting in a cafe, I'll pop in my headphones and listen to a podcast in the language I'm learning. This way, I'm constantly exposing myself to the language, even when I'm not actively studying. It's kind of like a mini immersion experience. And don't forget about people. If you get the chance, chat with locals. Even if it's just for a few minutes, every conversation counts.
Those are fantastic tips. It's all about finding ways to weave the language into your day so it becomes second nature. Language learning doesn't have to be confined to textbooks or language classes. It can be a living, breathing part of your travels. And let's not forget technology. Apps, podcasts, social media, and even language exchange platforms can help you keep learning while you're on the move.
Exactly. Technology has made it easier than ever to learn a language while traveling. For instance, there are apps that help you learn phrases on the go. And platforms like Duolingo, Babbel, or HelloTalk allow you to practice speaking with native speakers in a way that's flexible and convenient. Plus, social media can be an amazing resource. Follow accounts that post content in the language you're learning. You'll start picking up more everyday language in context, which is often more useful than the textbook stuff.
That's a great point, Daniel. And if you're feeling a bit shy about speaking, language exchange apps like Tandem or HelloTalk can be a great way to practice without the pressure. You can text, send voice messages, or even video chat with people from around the world. It's like having your own language partner wherever you go.
So true. The possibilities are endless. With all these resources at our fingertips, there's no excuse not to practice. Whether it's interacting with locals, using apps, or immersing yourself in the culture, every moment is an opportunity to improve. Language learning truly becomes a part of the travel experience.
Absolutely. And the more you practice, the more you start to enjoy the process. You'll find that language learning is not a chore. It's an exciting part of the adventure. It opens up new ways of seeing the world, connecting with people, and experiencing cultures.
And it's empowering. Learning a language while traveling shows you that you have the ability to adapt, to learn, and to communicate in a completely new way. It's a skill you can carry with you for the rest of your life, and it will only continue to enrich your travels.
Such great points. Language and travel are tools of empowerment and growth. They help us become more open, adaptable, and connected to the world. So, to everyone listening, don't be afraid to take that first step, whether it's learning a few key phrases or embarking on a whole new adventure. Keep pushing yourself, stay curious, and remember that every trip, every language lesson, and every conversation is a chance to grow. The world is waiting for you! You both make such valuable points about the power of language and travel. As we keep talking about these exciting ways to enhance our experiences, I think we should touch on the role of cultural sensitivity in travel. Daniel Jacob, how do you think learning the language ties into respecting and understanding a culture more deeply?
That's a really important aspect, Sophia. Learning a language isn't just about communication, it's about connecting on a cultural level. When you speak the local language, you're showing a genuine interest in understanding people's values, their history, and their way of life. For example, in some cultures, certain words or greetings can convey respect or hierarchy, and knowing those nuances makes you more sensitive to the cultural context. It's like opening a door to a deeper connection with the people around you.
Yes, I totally agree. It's about showing that you care about more than just getting by. You care about truly understanding the culture. I remember traveling to Japan, and one of the things I loved most was learning the polite expressions they use. It's a language of respect, And once I understood that, I could communicate more meaningfully. I think people from different cultures really appreciate when travelers take the time to learn even a little bit of their language. It shows that you respect their traditions and their way of life, and that builds trust and connection.
That's such a great point. I love the idea that learning the language opens up those deeper layers of understanding, almost like peeling back the layers of an onion. Now, let's talk a bit about one of the more practical aspects of travel: budgeting. Jacob, Daniel, have you ever found that speaking the language of the place you're visiting has helped you save money or navigate more efficiently?
Oh, absolutely. Being able to communicate in the local language can definitely make your trip more cost-effective. For example, when you're buying something at a market or bargaining for a price, knowing how to ask for discounts or how to explain your needs can help you get better deals. I've had experiences where, because I spoke the language, shopkeepers were more willing to give me a better price than they would have if I hadn't been able to communicate with them directly. Also, when you're looking for local restaurants or services, knowing the language means you can avoid tourist traps and find authentic, less expensive options that you might miss otherwise.
That's a great example, Daniel. I've had similar experiences in places where I didn't know the language well. I found myself relying on a lot of tourist-centric services that were more expensive. But in countries where I spoke the language, I was able to discover hidden gems, local eateries, markets, and places where prices were much more reasonable. Additionally, knowing the language helped me avoid misunderstandings. For instance, if I was asking for directions or transportation options, I could ensure I was getting the best route and the best price.
That's such a practical benefit. It goes beyond just language. It's about empowering yourself to be smarter and more self-sufficient while traveling. Now, let's talk about something a bit deeper. Travel can be a transformative experience in itself. Daniel, Jacob, what's one moment or lesson from your travels where language played a role in shifting your perspective on life or broadening your worldview?
Wow, that's a big question. I think one of the most eye-opening experiences for me happened when I was in South America, specifically in a small town in Peru. I wasn't fluent in Spanish at the time, but I knew enough to communicate. One day, I was talking to a local woman, and she shared a story about her family, how they'd been living in the same town for generations. The depth of her connection to the land and the community was something I wouldn't have fully understood if I hadn't been able to speak the language. It made me realize that language is more than just words. It's a connection to people's lives, their struggles, and their dreams. That conversation really changed how I think about the world and how important it is to connect with people beyond surface-level interactions.
That's such a powerful story, Daniel. For me, language and travel became even more meaningful when I spent some time living in a rural village in India. The villagers spoke a local language, and I had to learn it quickly to communicate with them. It wasn't the language itself, though, that shifted my perspective. It was the way the people used language to express deep emotions, wisdom, and warmth. Despite language barriers, I saw how language could convey kindness, humor, and even compassion in ways that transcended words. It taught me that sometimes it's not about getting every word right, it's about connecting on a deeper human level. That realization really opened my eyes to how interconnected we all are, despite our differences.
Wow, both of those experiences are so moving. It's incredible how language can reveal not just the mechanics of communication, but the heart of a culture and the souls of its people. It makes you realize that language is more than just a tool. It's a bridge to understanding compassion and shared experiences. I think that's what makes travel and language learning so powerful. They connect us in ways that go beyond words.
Exactly, Sophia. It's those moments when you connect with someone through language or through the shared experience of being in a new place that stay with you long after your travels are over. Language is not just something you study, it's something that lives and breathes in every interaction. And the more we embrace that, the more we embrace our travels and our lives.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the destinations. It's about the people we meet along the way, the stories they share, and the lessons we learn. Travel and language are two of the most powerful tools for personal growth, and they remind us of our shared humanity.
I couldn't agree more. Travel opens up so many doors to learning, growth, and connection. And language. Well, language is the key that unlocks those doors. So, to everyone listening, whether you're on your first adventure or your 100th, remember that each step is part of the journey, and every conversation is an opportunity to learn something new about the world and yourself.
And most importantly, never stop exploring. The world is vast and there's always something new to learn, something new to experience. Keep traveling, keep speaking, and keep growing.
Absolutely. And remember, whether it's through language or culture, every experience is a chance to enrich your life and broaden your perspective. So, get out there and embrace the world.
Before we wrap up, let's dive into one more crucial aspect of travel and language learning: the impact it can have on your personal growth. Traveling forces you to step out of your comfort zone, and learning a language is part of that challenge. Daniel, Jacob, how do you think traveling and language learning have shaped your personal growth over the years?
I think traveling and learning new languages have made me more adaptable and open-minded. In the past, I used to feel nervous about stepping unfamiliar situations or talking to strangers, especially in a language I wasn't fully comfortable with. But traveling has pushed me to face those fears. I've learned to be more patient with myself and others. It's humbling to be in a place where you don't understand everything, but that's also when you learn the most. You grow not just in language skills, but also in emotional resilience, in building empathy, and in accepting the unknown.
I completely agree. The process of learning a new language while traveling forces you to confront a lot of uncertainties. But it also teaches you to trust yourself and find creative ways to communicate. You quickly realize that people appreciate the effort, even if you make mistakes. That attitude of persistence and humility, I think, has helped me in so many areas of life, from professional challenges to personal relationships. It's all about learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and realizing that growth happens when we push ourselves beyond our limits.
That's so powerful. It's like travel and language learning create an environment where you're constantly evolving, and you don't even realize how much you're changing until you look back. I think both of you touched on something really important: confidence and self-reliance. It's amazing how travel can help build that.
Exactly. And beyond that, traveling gives you a deeper appreciation for the diversity of the world. You start to realize how rich and varied human experiences are. Language is one of the best windows into understanding those experiences. Once you can communicate in more than one language, you see the world through a new lens. It opens up opportunities to learn not just about other cultures, but also about yourself. Sometimes when you step into a different culture, you start to see your own values, beliefs, and assumptions more clearly.
Yes, and you begin to notice how interconnected we all are, despite the differences. Language becomes a bridge, not just to understanding others, but to understanding your own place in the world. You start to realize that no matter where you go, people are fundamentally the same. They all have dreams, fears, and desires. The language just brings all that to the surface, allowing you to connect with people on a much deeper level.
Wow, you both just captured the essence of what makes language and travel so transformative. It's not just about ticking off a list of places or learning a few phrases. It's about discovering new perspectives, gaining confidence, and truly connecting with people from all walks of life. And like you said, Jacob, that understanding stays with you long after the journey ends.
And that's what makes the journey so much more rewarding. You come back home, but you're different in the best way possible. Your worldview expands, your empathy grows, and you feel more connected to the world around you. Travel and language learning leave lasting impressions that shape the person you become.
Exactly, Daniel. And I think one of the most rewarding things about travel is how much it teaches you about the world, but also how much it teaches you about yourself. You get to explore new places, meet new people, and in the process, you discover new strengths and passions that you never knew you had.
I couldn't have said it better. Whether it's a new language or a new country, travel has a way of breaking down barriers, not just between cultures, but also within ourselves. It pushes us to grow, learn, and become more empathetic.
And that's the beauty of it. Every language and every journey is a new chapter in your personal growth story. It's something that, once you experience it, you want to keep going back to. Travel and language are never-ending paths of discovery.
Absolutely. And the world is just waiting for us to explore it one conversation, one journey at a time.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. Travel and language aren't just about the places you visit or the words you learn. They're about the people you meet and the way they change you. I hope everyone listening feels inspired to take that next step, to learn something new, to explore, and to connect with the world around them.
I agree. There's always something new to discover, both in the world and within ourselves.
And the journey never really ends, right?
Exactly. It's really been an incredible conversation, and there's still so much to explore when it comes to travel and language. One thing that's fascinating is how travel challenges us to rethink how we communicate. Daniel, Jacob, have you had any moments while traveling where you learned something unexpected about communication or language?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I was in Japan. Even though I didn't speak Japanese fluently, I noticed that body language and non-verbal cues became a huge part of communication. For example, when people didn't understand what I was saying, they would often rely on gestures or even the tone of their voice to make the meaning clearer. It really opened my eyes to how much we communicate without words. And that's something I try to bring with me, even when I'm speaking my native language. Being more aware of non-verbal communication makes me a better listener.
That's such an interesting point, Daniel. I've had similar experiences. In Spain, I was trying to ask for directions, and I knew just enough Spanish to get by, but the person I was talking to didn't understand my accent or phrasing. What I found fascinating was that instead of getting frustrated, we both started pointing and using the surroundings to explain things. We even used drawings on a piece of paper. That experience made me realize that communication is more than just knowing the right words. It's about mutual understanding. And when we don't understand each other verbally, we have so many other ways to make it work.
I love that. It really shows the power of creativity and patience in communication. I think sometimes we focus so much on getting the words right that we forget that understanding comes from the intention behind those words. It's not about perfect grammar or pronunciation. It's about the message, the connection, and those moments of misunderstanding. They often lead to the most memorable experiences.
Exactly. Those moments, where there's a bit of confusion but also a willingness to work through it, really show the true value of communication. And I think it's these kinds of moments that help you realize how language is a tool for connection, not perfection.
And sometimes when we're in those situations, the people we're interacting with are just as understanding and willing to meet us halfway. There's a certain beauty in that shared effort. I remember being in Thailand and I knew very little Thai, but people there were so kind, so patient. They appreciated my effort to speak their language, even if it wasn't perfect. And in return, I wanted to learn as much as I could to respect their culture. It's amazing how something simple as saying hello in someone's native language can open so many doors.
That's such a heartwarming example. It makes me think of how language is also about respect. Respect for the culture, the people, and their way of life. Sometimes, just showing that you're trying to speak someone else's language can break down barriers and build trust, which is so important when you're traveling. The willingness to connect with people, even if it's through a few imperfect words, can go a long way.
Absolutely. I think learning a language shows a level of humility too. It's like you're saying, I might not be perfect, but I'm willing to try. And when people see that, they're often more than happy to help you along the way.
Right? And it's those little moments of kindness that really make a trip memorable. The conversations that go beyond just getting directions or ordering food, where you start to share stories and you realize that despite the language barrier, you're really connecting with the other person on a human level. And that's what makes travel so special. It's not just about the places you see, but the people you meet and the relationships you form along the way.
I completely agree, Jacob. And speaking of those human connections, let's talk about the long-term benefits of learning a language through travel. How have you noticed your language skills improve? And how has travel contributed to that progress?
Well, for me, travel has always been the most practical way to improve my language skills. It's one thing to study a language in a classroom, but when you're immersed in it, you learn so much faster. I remember when I first arrived in Italy, I could barely speak the language. But within a few months, I was holding basic conversations because I wasn't learning from a textbook. I was learning by doing. And I think that's something that can't be replicated by just sitting in a classroom. It's all about putting yourself in real-world situations and making mistakes along the way.
That's so true. When I went to Brazil, I barely knew any Portuguese. But once I got there, I started picking up on the phrases people use daily. Things like how they greet each other or the small talk that happens at the grocery store. It was the kind of language you don't necessarily learn in a textbook, but it's essential for connecting with people. And once I got comfortable with those basic expressions, I started to understand the structure of the language more clearly. It made me realize that language learning is less about memorization and more about practice and experience.
I love that you both emphasize learning by doing. It's such a powerful way to understand the nuances of a language, like the slang, the tone, and the context. You really have to step into the culture to grasp it fully. It's not just about mastering the words. It's about living the language.
Absolutely, Sophia. And of course, while travel gives you that immersive experience, you can also learn a lot by engaging with local communities, even if you're not in a foreign country. With technology, we have so many opportunities to connect with people from all over the world. Online language exchanges, social media groups, and language at it easier than ever to practice and improve.
And those connections don't just happen in person. Through the internet, we can be in constant touch with people from different parts of the world, practicing languages, learning about their culture, and sharing ideas. I think that's one of the most exciting things about the way we communicate now. It's global, and it's so accessible.
Yes, technology really is a game changer. And that's another thing. Travel and language learning open us up to a world of opportunities. Whether it's in person or online, we can connect with people anywhere, anytime. It's incredible how far-reaching these experiences can be.
Exactly, Sophia. It's like the world has become smaller, and language is the bridge that allows us to explore it, not just physically but intellectually, emotionally. You can travel through words, connect with people halfway around the world, and share experiences that go beyond borders.
That's the power of travel and language. It's not just about seeing new places, it's about expanding your world, your mindset, and your understanding of others. And as we've talked about today, it's a lifelong journey of growth and connection.
I'm glad we could dive deep into this topic today. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you both one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone looking to travel and learn a new language, what would it be?
That's a great question, Sophia. For me, the most important piece of advice would be to approach the experience with an open mind and a lot of patience. You can't expect to become fluent in a language overnight, and you certainly can't expect everything to go smoothly while you're traveling. There will be challenges, but those challenges are part of what makes the experience so rich. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, embrace them. Mistakes are where growth happens. The key is persistence and the willingness to step out of your comfort zone.
I completely agree with Daniel. I would also add that it's crucial to immerse yourself as much as possible. The more you put yourself in situations where you're using the language and experiencing the culture, the faster you'll learn. And remember, it's not just about textbook knowledge, it's about real-world application. Also, be kind to yourself. There will be times when you feel frustrated, but every bit of progress is worth celebrating, no matter how small.
Such valuable advice from both of you. I think the key takeaway here is that language learning and travel are journeys. They aren't linear and they require patience, persistence, and a willingness to learn from every step, even the mistakes. It's the experiences and the connections you make that shape your journey. There's no need to rush. The beauty is in the process and in how much you learn along the way, both about the world and about yourself.
Exactly, Sophia. It's a long-term investment, but one that pays off in ways that go beyond language skills. It changes your mindset, your worldview, and how you relate to others.
And it's not just about speaking the language, it's about living it. The more you experience, the more you truly understand what it means to communicate across cultures.
You've both brought up amazing points, and I think this episode has been a fantastic reminder of the power of language, travel, and cultural exchange. Thank you both for sharing your insights today, and I'm sure our listeners will leave this conversation feeling motivated and excited to start their own journeys.
It was a pleasure being here, Sophia. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, it was really great to discuss this with you both. I hope everyone listening feels inspired to take that first step, whether it's traveling to a new destination or starting to learn a new language.
Absolutely. As we approach the end of today's episode, I want to thank both Daniel and Jacob once again for sharing their wisdom and experiences. Traveling and learning a new language are such powerful tools for personal growth, and I hope this conversation has inspired our listeners to step outside their comfort zones and embrace the journey of discovery. Remember, it's not just about where you go or how much you know. It's about the connections you make and the growth that happens along the way.
Thanks for having me, Sophia. It was great to reflect on the impact that travel and language learning have had on my life. I hope our listeners take away that the journey is just as important as the destination. Keep pushing forward and enjoy every step of the way.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that everyone listening feels inspired to embark on their own travel or language learning journey. Don't forget, it's all about the experiences, the people you meet, and the lessons you learn along the way.
Thank you so much, Daniel and Jacob, and to our wonderful listeners. We hope you found value in today's discussion and that it sparks your passion for learning, traveling, and discovering new perspectives. Remember, the world is full of opportunities to connect, grow, and experience life in ways you've never imagined. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the English Hour so you never miss an episode. We have so much more in store for you. Whether it's tips on language learning, travel stories, or other exciting topics that will help you on your journey of growth. And if you liked today's conversation, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. You can follow us on social media for updates and extra content, or visit our website for more resources and episodes. Make sure to leave a review too. Your feedback helps us improve and bring you even more content that you'll love. We truly appreciate your support.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be part of our next adventure.
And if you have any thoughts or questions about today's episode, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear your travel stories or language learning tips.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.